In an African tribe village, the chieftain's wife gave birth to a white-skinned child. The chieftain quickly figured the voluntary doctor from Europe might be to blame, so the chieftain asked him to talk in his tent. "Today my wife gave birth to a white child. She and I are dark-skinned. You are white. It doesn't take a doctor to figure out that you have slept with my wife." The doctor remains calm. The answer lies in the genetics. Some genetics have recessive traits which are not apparent to the parents but may be passed on to the child. For example, last week one of your sheep gave birth to a black sheep. The chieftain pauses for a thinking, then replies, "I tell you what, you say no word about black sheep, and I say no word about white child." Three supermodels are on a plane that's going down over the Atlantic Ocean. While they're putting on their life preservers, they start talking about what they're going to wear. The white woman says, "I'm going to wear my hot pink bikini because when they rescue us, they'll easily be able to see it, and hot pink really accentuates my features." The Hispanic woman says, "I'm going to wear my bright yellow bikini because it really brings out my eyes and it's much more visible than hot pink is, so I'll be rescued first." The black woman says, "I'm going to go naked." Perplexed, the other two ask why. She answers, because in a plane crash, the first thing they look for is the little black box. My friend and I were halfway through a round of golf when a funeral procession rolled by. I immediately took my cap off and stood quietly until it had passed. He looked at me and said, "That's a lovely show of respect." I said, "Well, we were married for 35 years. My neighbor. She's single, she's shapely and beautiful, and she lives right across the street. I watched her as she got home from work this evening. I was surprised when she walked across the street, up my driveway, and knocked on my door. I opened the door, she looked at me and said, "I just got home and I have this strong urge to have a good time, get drunk, and have fun tonight. Are you doing anything?" I quickly replied, "Nope, I'm free." "Great," she said. "Can you watch my dog?" A husband and wife were watching a late-night documentary about a remote African tribe. The narrator explained that the men there were famous for having very long manhoods, often 20 inches or more. According to the program, when boys reached adulthood, they tied a string around themselves with a small weight attached. Over time, the weight slowly stretched things out. Later that night, after the husband stepped out of the shower, his wife glanced down and smiled. "You know what, honey," she said, "maybe we should try that string and weight trick they showed on TV." The husband thought about it for a moment. Well, why not? So they tied a string and attached a small weight, just like in the documentary. A week later, the wife asked, "So, how's our little experiment going?" The husband shrugged. "Well, we're about halfway there." Her eyes widened. "Halfway? You mean it's already 10 inches? He sighed and said, "No, but it's turned black." A wife buys her redneck husband a scale to help him with his new diet. A week later, the redneck says, "Honey, this here scale is great. Now not only can I weigh myself, but now I know how much I'm shitting out 'cause of my new diet." His wife says, "That's great, I never thought of that. So you step on the scale before you go to the toilet, step on the scale again when you're done, and the difference is the weight of your poop." And the redneck says, "Well, yeah, I guess I could do it that way." There was a very, very unlucky man with a single testicle. One day, he went on a plane. Unfortunately, a malfunction occurred. The flight crew announced that the plane was going down, and one of the passengers had to be thrown out to reduce weight. To determine the victim, passengers drew lots, and the unlucky man was chosen. He refused furiously, saying, "No, I lived a miserable life because of my bad luck, and I refuse to let it dictate the end of my days." Passengers drew lots for the second time. He was chosen again. He refused for the second time with less determination. When the lots were drawn for the third time, his name was chosen once more. He refused again. Finally, when his name appeared again after the fourth ballot, he said, "Okay, I agree to jump off the plane on one condition. You have to guess this correctly. What is the total number of testicles of me and the man in front of me?" Passengers looked at each other with slight surprise and a grin on their faces and said, "4, of course." The man laughed at them, saying, "No, you're wrong, as you see," while revealing his proud single testicle to them. Then the other man pulled down his pants. He had 3 testicles. A mother had 3 virgin daughters. They were all getting married within a short time period because Mom was a bit worried about how their sex life would get started. She made them all promise to send a postcard from the honeymoon with a few words on how marital sex felt. The first girl sent a card from Hawaii 2 days after the wedding. The card said nothing but Nescafe. Mom was puzzled at first, but then went to the kitchen and got out the Nescafe jar. It said, "Good till the last drop." Mom blushed but was pleased for her daughter. The second girl sent the card from Vermont a week after the wedding, and the card read, "Benson and Hedges." Mom now knew to go straight to her husband's cigarettes, and she read from the Benson and Hedges pack, "Extra long, king size." She was again slightly embarrassed, but still happy for her daughter. The third girl left for her honeymoon in the Caribbean. Mom waited for a week. Nothing. Another week went by, and still nothing. Then, after a whole month, a card finally arrived. Written on it with shaky handwriting were the words, "British Airways." Mom took out her latest Harper's Bazaar magazine, flipped through the pages fearing the worst, and finally found the ad for the airline. The ad said, 3 times a day, 7 days a week, both ways. A blonde walks into a shoe store and tries on a pair of shoes. "How do they feel?" asks the sales clerk. "Well, they feel a bit tight," replies the blonde. The assistant promptly bends down and has a look at the shoes and the blonde's feet. "Try pulling the tongue out," offers the clerk. This still feels a bit tight," the blonde replies. A man in rags parks a 40-year-old pickup truck next to a printing store and walks up to the counter. He says, "I need 20 pictures of Kim Kardashian. I'll pay later." The store clerk agrees and makes the prints. The truck guy drives away with them. Sometime later, he comes back in decent clothes and a 20-year-old truck, pays for the 20 pictures, and says, "I need 50 pictures of Kim Kardashian." He gets them and drives away with them. Soon he comes back in a brand new truck and new clothes and says, "I need 100 pictures of Kim Kardashian." He gets them and takes them away. Soon he comes back in a huge customized truck and designer clothes and says, "I need 200 pictures of Kim Kardashian." The store clerk asks him, "What's the deal with these pictures? How come you were recently poor, but now you're driving a truck worth more than my house?" The man replies, "I opened a shooting range." The teacher assigned her 5th graders to ask a parent to tell them a story with a moral. The next day, the kids shared the usual spilled milk and pennies saved tales until only Janie was left. "Janie, do you have a story?" the teacher asked. "Yes, ma'am. My daddy told me about Auntie Susie. She was a Marine pilot in Desert Storm. Her plane got hit, and she bailed out over enemy territory with only a flask of whiskey, a pistol, and a survival knife. She drank the whiskey on the way down so the bottle wouldn't break. Her parachute landed her in the middle of 20 Iraqi troops. She shot 15 of them, then killed 4 more with the knife before the blade broke, and finished the last one with her bare hands." The teacher gasped. "Good heavens, what's the moral?" Janie grinned. "Stay away from my Auntie Susie when she's drunk." So I recently got engaged and used to visit my future in-laws' house quite frequently. My fiancée had a stepsister who used to tease me a lot. She used to stare at me across the dining table, used to bend down while wearing a skirt, etc. A couple of days before the wedding, she called me at the house to help her make the invitation cards. When I arrived, there was no one at the house. I went upstairs to her bedroom, knocked, and went in. I sat down beside her and started making the cards. After a while, she said, "Before you get married, I want to f*** you just once, please." I got up, went out of the room, and after opening the door of the house, I saw my parents, fiancé, and my future in-laws running towards me with tears in their eyes, saying, "You've passed." Moral of the story, always keep the condoms in the car. A 70-year-old woman chose to remain overnight in a costly hotel as a treat for her birthday. The following morning, she was appalled when the desk clerk gave her a bill for $250. She requested to know why the charge was too high. "It's a nice hotel, but the rooms certainly aren't worth $250 for just an overnight stay. I didn't even have breakfast," she told the clerk. The clerk clarified that $250 is the standard rate. At that point, the older lady insisted on talking with the manager. The manager showed up and explained that the hotel has an Olympic-sized pool and a huge conference center, which are available for use. "But I didn't use them," the old woman said. "Well, they are here, and you could have," he replied. The manager proceeded with that she could likewise have seen one of the in-hotel shows for which the hotel is famous. "We have the best entertainers from the world over performing here," he said. "But I didn't go to any of those shows," she said. The manager replied, "Well, we have them, and you could have." Regardless of what facility he recommended, the older lady would just answer, "But I didn't use it." The manager then countered with his standard reaction. After several minutes of contending with him, she chose to pay. The manager was shocked when she gave the check to him. "But madam, this check is for only $50, he said. "That is right. I charged you $200 for sleeping with me," the old lady replied. "But I didn't," the manager shouted. "Well, too bad. I was here and you could have." Johnny walks into a general store, goes to the owner, and asks for a new job. The owner says, "Do you think you're a good salesman?" Johnny says, "I don't know. I think so." The owner says, "I'll tell you what. The next customer comes in and you watch me. If you think you can do what I'm doing, you've got a new job." A customer comes in a few minutes later. The owner says, "Can I help you?" The customer says, "Yes, I want to buy a box of grass seed." "No problem," says the owner, looking for a box of grass seed. "Do you think you might want a lawnmower with that?" "Lawnmower," says the customer. "Yes," says the owner. "If you plant that grass seed, you're going to have a lot of grass to cut. You may also want to buy a lawnmower too." The customer thinks it's a great idea and accepts. The owner sells him the grass seeds and the lawnmower, and the customer leaves. The owner turns to Johnny and says, "See that? That's selling. The guy wanted some grass seeds, and I sold him a lawnmower too. Do you think he can do that?" Johnny says, "Yeah, he can do that." So the owner says, "Great. The next customer who comes in is yours. I will just stand here quietly and watch. We will see how you do." A few minutes pass by, and another customer enters. Johnny says, "Can I help you?" The customer says, "Yes, I want to buy a box of Tampax for my wife." "No problem," says Johnny as he reaches for the box of Tampax. "Do you think you might want a lawnmower with that?" "Lawnmower," says the customer. "Yeah," says Johnny. "You're not going to be doing anything else for the next 7 days. You might as well cut the grass." My neighbor was working in his garden when a car suddenly crashed through his hedge and stopped on his lawn. He rushed over and helped the elderly driver into a chair. Trying to be polite, he said, "Ma'am, aren't you a bit old to still be driving?" She smiled proudly. "I'll be 97 next month." "Wait, you still have a license?" She laughed. "Oh no, I don't need one anymore." Why's that? Well, my doctor asked if I had one, so I handed it to him. He cut it into little pieces, threw it in the bin, and said, "You won't be needing this anymore." So I thanked him and left. Jay observed a sign in the window of a restaurant that read, "Unique Breakfast," so he walked in and sat down. The waitress brought him his coffee and asked him what he wanted. Jay, "What's your unique breakfast?" Waitress, "Baked tongue of chicken." Jay, "Baked tongue of chicken? Do you have any idea how disgusting that is? I would never even consider eating anything that came out of a chicken's mouth." Undaunted, the waitress asked, "What would you like then?" "Just bring me scrambled eggs," Jay replied. One evening after her honeymoon, Margaret was at her craft station in the spare room, tinkering with some squares of fabric and happily playing on her sewing machine just for fun. Her new hubby leaned against the doorframe, watching quietly as she happily beavered away. After a long pause, he coughed lightly to get her attention, then said, "Honey, now that we're married, maybe it's time you stopped spending so much time in here. You could sell all these yards of fabric, these ribbons, buttons, and bows, the glue guns, and honestly, that old sewing machine belonged in the trash years ago." Margaret froze, staring at him like she'd grown two heads. "What's wrong, my sweet pea?" he asked, confused. "For a second there," Margaret said slowly, "you sounded just like my ex-husband." His eyes widened with surprise. "Ex-husband? You never told me you'd been married before." Margaret shrugged. "I haven't."